All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we are going to dive into a question, and it's one that I'm sure has crossed all of our minds at some point or another.
For sure.
Why does God allow suffering and evil?
Yeah.
It's a big one. We've got some excerpts from the Bible that you sent in, so we're going to use those as kind of our springboard to try to unpack this,
Okay.
to grapple with it a bit, I guess you could
Yeah,
say.
sounds good.
Yeah, so like I was saying, this is a question that has plagued, I think, humanity for ages, right?
Yeah, it has. It's such a universal thing. And, the Bible, it really doesn't shy away from suffering.
Right.
It confronts it head on.
Yeah,
It
sure.
talks about these difficult experiences that people go through.
It does, and I think one of the most striking examples of that is the story of Job, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this guy's described as righteous, like beyond reproach,
Totally.
and yet he endures just horrific suffering.
It's
And it's not really portrayed as a consequence of his actions. It's almost like kind of like a test from God. How do you wrap your mind around that?
Well, the book of Job really pushes us to think outside the box. We tend to think of suffering as a direct punishment for our bad deeds, like you do something bad and boom.
You get what's coming to you.
Yeah, exactly. Karma. But Job's story, it kind of throws a wrench in that. It introduces this whole concept of a divine test.
Hmm.
And that brings up so many questions. Like, does God actually inflict suffering to make our faith stronger?
Yeah.
Or is it more about revealing our true character through the fire, so to speak?
Right.
Even Job himself wrestles with these very questions. He demands answers from God.
He does, and that's something I find so interesting about the story. Job, he doesn't just sit back and passively accept his suffering. He actually questions God directly. I mean,
Oh.
talk about bold.
Totally. And what's even more remarkable is that the text doesn't condemn him for it. It actually seems to suggest that this wrestling with your faith,
Yeah.
with your doubts, that's actually part of having a genuine relationship with God. It's not about just blindly accepting everything. It's about that deep, honest dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah, no matter how painful that dialogue might be.
Exactly.
And I think that actually leads us really well into another passage that you pulled out, which is Romans 8:28. It says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose."
Oh, yeah. That one.
I have to admit, I've always found this verse to be both like comforting and confusing at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how can that possibly be a part of God's good plan?
Yeah, it's a really tough one. I think it's important to remember that this verse, it doesn't diminish the very real pain and suffering that people experience. What it does offer, though, is a lens to view that suffering through.
Okay.
It suggests that even in the darkest moments,
Yeah.
there could be a larger purpose at work, one that we just can't quite grasp in the moment.
Yeah. It's like that thing. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, maybe in the thick of it,
Mm-hmm.
we can't see how this could possibly be good.
Yeah.
But later on, when we look back, we can see how that experience actually shaped us.
Exactly. Think about a time in your own life, right, when you went through something that was just incredibly hard.
Yeah.
I mean, really difficult. Did that experience, as painful as it was, did it end up leading to some kind of growth? Maybe it made you more resilient, or maybe you came to a deeper understanding of yourself or even the world around you.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And speaking of growth through hardship,
Mm.
we have Hebrews 12:5-11.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about God's discipline,
Mm.
and it compares it to like a loving father's correction.
Right.
And I mean, we all know that correction. It doesn't always feel good in the moment.
No, it doesn't.
It can be tough,
Yeah.
but it's for our benefit ultimately.
That's true. I mean, think of it like an athlete who's training for the Olympics, right? They push themselves to their absolute limits. They endure pain, exhaustion, setbacks,
Mm-hmm.
but they do it all with a specific goal in mind. And they trust their coach to guide them toward that goal.
Yeah.
This passage in Hebrews, it's kind of suggesting that maybe suffering is like a training ground for our spirits.
Cool.
It's refining us, preparing us for something greater.
So we've got this idea of suffering as a test,
Mm.
potentially a path to growth, even part of a bigger purpose that we don't fully understand.
Mm.
But what about the here and now? What about the day-to-day reality of pain and grief and that sense of injustice when bad things happen?
Yeah.
How do we deal with that?
That's where 2 Corinthians 1:3-4 comes in. It talks about God being there with us, comforting us in our troubles.
Okay.
And it's not just about receiving comfort, it's about then taking that comfort and turning it outward, comforting others who are going through tough times.
So it's almost like suffering, while it is deeply personal, can also create a sense of shared humanity, you know. It
Absolutely.
allows us to connect with other people on this deeper level, to offer genuine comfort because we've walked a similar path ourselves.
Exactly. It changes the whole dynamic. Instead of saying, oh, I can't imagine what you're going through, it becomes, I've been there. I know how much it hurts.
Yeah.
And that shared experience, that can be incredibly powerful.
Now, another verse you pointed to is John 16:33, where Jesus says, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world."
That's a big one.
It's such a straightforward statement. Like, yeah, trouble's coming, it's a guarantee, but so is victory. How do those two things coexist?
I think it's important to recognize that this verse doesn't offer us a simple solution
hmm
or a way to just bypass suffering completely.
Okay.
What it does offer is hope and reassurance.
Okay.
It's a reminder that suffering is a part of being human, but there's this greater reality that exists beyond that suffering.
So it's like, okay, we're not promised a life free from pain,
Right.
but we are promised a love that walks with us through it.
Yes.
A hope that sustains us, and a victory that ultimately overcomes.
And speaking of that ultimate victory, there's Revelation 21.4, which describes this future.
Okay.
And in this future, God will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away.
That's powerful. I mean, what an image of healing and restoration.
It is.
It's almost like this glimpse into a reality where suffering is completely, totally eradicated.
Yeah.
Obviously, it doesn't erase the pain that we experience in the present, but it does offer such a profound sense of hope.
Absolutely. And it brings us back to that idea of purpose.
Yeah.
Suffering might be part of our reality right now, but it's not the end of the story. There's this future where it's completely gone, where everything is made new.
So, wow. We've gone through a lot.
Yeah.
We've looked at all these different passages.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you, but I feel like we haven't necessarily found all the answers, but we've gotten some really valuable insights into the nature of suffering and God's role in all of it.
For
What
sure.
are your thoughts?
Well, one thing I always come back to is that faith and doubt.
Yeah.
They're not mutually exclusive. They often go hand in hand.
Right?
These questions about suffering, I mean, they've challenged theologians and philosophers for centuries.
Yeah.
So it's more than okay to wrestle with them,
Mm-hmm.
to ask those tough questions, and to really search for understanding.
Absolutely. And as you continue to reflect on everything that we've talked about today, I want you to consider this. If suffering can actually lead to growth, and to empathy, and maybe even a deeper connection with God, what does that say about the nature of our human experience and, our relationship with the divine? That's something to think about. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.